All right. So do we go now, Beth? Was it our turn?
It's your turn.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming along tonight. My name's Pete Tashkoff, as Beth said, and I'm a coach. I'm an Agile coach, just like many of you are. So what we're going to be looking through tonight is some material that we've put together concerning, taking Ahmed Sidki's concept of mindset to practices and discussing it in a bit more depth and looking at how it applies to disciplines within the broader Agile, DevOps, Lean context, not just Agile as a framework, but the frameworks that exist within that for BAs, project managers, testers, QA, blah, blah, whatever. So that's sort of going to be the emphasis we're on tonight. Pallavi, would you like to say a few words? Introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone, good evening. My name is Pallavi Nellipudi, like Beth introduced. So yes, I'd like to call myself a transformation agent. Working in that space for a while now. So this topic, I guess, fits in very nicely with the current times, is what we feel. So yeah, with that, we'll get started.
Okay, so this is the first time that Pallavi and I have done this in a virtual context. We've done it twice before, once to the Project Management Institute and once to the IIBA. Slightly different set of slides, but basically the same thing. This is the first time we've done it virtually though. So we're going to have to hand off to each other, and there might be a few little pauses and stops along the way, but we'll get through it all right. So I'm going to share a screen now, and then we'll start working through the slides. Sorry about this, it just takes a second to work it all out. Okay, is everybody looking at a slide deck now? Yeah, we're all looking at that. Okay, so this is the topic, adopting a transformational mindset and moving from the mindset side of the thing towards practices. We don't want to do too much speaking. There will be a certain amount of speaking, but what we really wanted to do is to get to the activity at the end. When we get to the end, we're going to be doing an activity. It's going to involve some of the technology in Zoom with breakout rooms, some rapid listing techniques using silent writing. We'll explain it in a bit more as we get to that part of it. Please, if there's any questions along the way, please ask them. I'm not sure whether Beth, are we going to unmute at this point?
Yes, if that's what you'd like, yes.
Yeah, so if there's any questions, please do ask them. And if they're quick and we can address them in the flow, then we'll address them in the flow. Otherwise, might need to park them onto a parking lot or something like that. So what we're trying to avoid is this talking head approach with Pallavi and I just speaking to you, but to some extent there has to be a bit of that. All right, so let's move into it. Pallavi, over to you.
Cool, thanks Pete. So just to keep things seamless, what we're doing is Pete will manage the session. We won't keep sharing our screens. So what that might mean for you guys is you might hear a little bit more of, Pete, you want to go to the next slide or next click, so just bear with us. Okay, getting started, I guess let's ask the most important question in any context is why. So we're talking about how do we approach moving from mindset to practices, but what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Ideally, I'd actually ask this question and let there be some active input from you guys, but just moving on. Digital disruption is no longer the news. Like Pete said, before we go into the detail, I just want to say that we first created the first draft of this presentation probably late last year, sometime October, November, when we presented to PMI first. So when we were invited to speak at Agile Auckland, we actually took a look at this to see if it was if it was relevant, if we had to make any changes in terms of virtual. What we actually realized is it's all the more relevant in the context that we are currently there with whatever is going on around. And the reason is this, I guess, COVID-19 has disrupted our way of working, way of life in a way probably we've never seen before. What it also means that it has actually accelerated the digital disruption, or you can call it accelerated the need for digital innovation. That's basically based on your outlook, I guess, how you look at it. But certainly it's no longer news. Everybody agrees that that is something that is happening, and companies are actually trying to reinvent themselves, right? But as they're trying, are they really reinventing, or are we just seeing the same old approaches being taken to deal with the new problems? And what I mean by that is transformation in essence is new ways of working, new ways of organizing ourselves. Do we actually see that? How many times you guys actually hear about or been in organizations or contexts that, hey, we've tried the transformation, it didn't fail, so we're trying something new. Or we've tried transformation, it didn't work, so we went back to our old ways of working. I just want to pause there a bit because in essence, transformation is a permanent thing. So if we are able to actually easily roll back to our old ways of working, it was probably not transformation to start with in the first place. So Pete, do you want to go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Okay, so what do you think happens when we apply the same old thinking to the problems that we currently have? No surprises there, it gives us the same old results. And in the same old results, if we apply more of the same old thinking, it just gives the same old results again. So essentially, we're talking about a deadlock kind of a situation. And no wonder there comes a lot of frustration for individuals and organizations trying this again and again. Pete, moving on to the next one.
So this is my slide to start with.
Yep.
Pallavi. So the concept that we're now going to speak to you on is something we call disciplined thought, or framework thinking is another term for it. So solution thinking is, if there's any BAs in the room, they'll know that that's a natural state for humans. We naturally want to move towards solutions. So there's our goal up there. It could be an opportunity or a problem, and we apply solution thinking to it. And solution thinking can be described. So obviously it's focused on finding a solution. Generally speaking, it will manifest as loosely defined methods. If there's any method at all, it will be a very limited form of brainstorming. It won't be proper brainstorming because there'll be no rules. It'll basically just be everybody talking. Large meetings with poor or missing agenda. So I think about now people start going, hey, I'm starting to recognize this. I attend a lot of meetings with poor or missing agenda, people sitting around with their laptops open. Is a characteristic of this kind of thing. Unstructured, wide-ranging conversation. So you could call a meeting on one subject, and then halfway through it starts heading off down another channel, or more than one channel. It starts jumping all over the place. This is another aspect of solution thinking. Decisions are based on HIPPO, highest paid person's opinion, or the sexiest option that wins on the day. So that's how decisions are arrived at in these meetings. Decisions don't tend to be very, they don't tend to have much staying power because they haven't gone through a proper data-driven process. They've just been whatever happened in the room. They drive directly towards a solution. And what we see is frequent false starts addressing superficialities. So we head off that way, no, that's not right. Then we try that way, then we try that way, then we try that way. Then we try that way, and if we're lucky, we might actually hit the target. But what generally happens is we never hit the target and we just re-describe the target. So we just change our scope and we say that's what we wanted all along, right? Now this is different than fail fast and learning. This is not about fail fast and learning. This is about actually not doing enough thought about what it is you want to do before we get into it. Now this is a mode of thought that's prevalent around, at least around the Western world globally. It's not something that's just in New Zealand. I'm sure it's familiar to most of you. If it's not familiar to you, you're among the lucky few. this is something that many organisations have in the way that they operate. Pallavi, I'll turn it to you now for framework thinking.
Cool. Sorry, apologize for my picture showing up all the time, because Pete thought, because he's sharing the screen, he wanted to make sure my, he did this in the last 10 minutes, I guess, so I do apologize. Okay, framework thinking is quite different to solution thinking in a way, which is what we are encouraging in terms of having the right mindset. So the traits go something like this. So it is focused on understanding the nature of the problem. An example of that is, for example, if a server went down, instead of just saying, hey, the problem was the server went down, what is the nature of the problem? Is that a risk management problem? Didn't we identify that risk or mitigate it properly? Or is it more of a disaster recovery kind of a plan that we didn't think through? So rather than focus on that particular problem alone, try and understand about what the nature of the problem is. Next one, please. Reference framework. So we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel in all instances. I'm not saying not to be innovative or not to be creative, absolutely not. But at the same time, not every problem needs a brand new solution. So where applicable, please do use global reference frameworks, best practices, things that are available, that are proven to make our lives easier. Next one, please. A wide range of techniques applied appropriately. Again, it's no one size fits all. So even for a simple technique that we probably use in our everyday lives and definitely in the work environment, like to get to a root cause of a problem, there's multiple techniques that we can use, like 5 whys or fishbone diagram or Pareto analysis. So there's a wide range of technique we can actually apply to get to the base of the problem. Next one, please. Tight meetings with well-defined agenda, again, ties in back with what we talked about, what not to do. It's really surprising how many meetings we have in our calendars day in, day out that don't even define the agenda. So what is the purpose of the meeting? What are the outcomes that we are trying to get out of the meeting? So how will we run that meeting? Is that more of a brainstorm session, or is there a particular structure to that meeting? In fact, what I personally found is that ever since we've started working remotely, at least in the context of my work, it actually, I think in a way there is a necessity to be more organized about our meetings to get the right outcomes and respect the time that we get from others rather than just being in person. So that was interesting. Next one, please. Structured conversations. Again, this ties in very well with the tight meetings. So even if it's not specifically a meeting, we're not just saying, oh, not to have casual conversations, no, but have a clear differentiation in terms of when you're having that casual conversation versus when you're having a structured conversation in a work context. Next one. Decisions based on compelling scenario. And what that means is data-based, fact-based decisions. Something that is validated by the customers or even some customer research done, rather than the anti-patterns would be hierarchical based or people, who are probably shouting or, who get there, have stronger voices than some of the others. So, have them based on compelling scenarios. Next one. Drive towards identifying the appropriate framework. This is quite useful as well. So in terms of, it's not, think about things that apply in your context, a risk management framework, a problem definition framework. There's many available, and you can actually apply that to the context of the organization and the work that you're doing. And also you can take elements of it, if not completely as well sometimes. So use what is available. Next one, please. Steady progression, addressing fundamentals. And that's actually, ties in, it's like, what happens when you build a fancy house without strong foundations? Like it collapses at some point. So it's the same thing. But how many of us probably in the work context move on to jazzy stuff or, have a really difficult case when we have to, for example, put together a business case or get some funding secured for technical debt, which we know probably is one of the foundational stuff that we have to sort out to have the kind of resilience, scalability for the systems or the organization. But doesn't get addressed. So with framework thinking, I guess what we're saying is when we think in terms of this mindset, you do have a better chance of going to your goal. There is one other kind of thinking that's not very popular, but we do it without realizing, which people talk about.
Okay, so this is hidebound thinking. It's the technique that's often described as to a man with a hammer, every problem is a nail. You probably heard that expression. Hidebound thinking is the kind of thinking that people who have stopped learning display. You see it in a lot of organizations where the methods of operating from the last revolution, the previous revolution that we're now coming out of, are still very prevalent, but people still use them because that's all they know how to use, and they haven't developed a lifelong learning mindset. Now, you're at this meeting, you're part of Agile Auckland. I'm pretty sure every single one of you has adopted a lifelong learning concept and mindset. So this won't be applying to you, but you'll be running into it everywhere you go. Process police, people more interested in following the process than they are interested in getting value to the customer, because that's how they've learned how to do things. And they don't have that growth mindset. They've got a fixed mindset, which are concepts I'm sure are familiar with you as well. So that's framework thinking. We just introduced that because what we're talking about is framework, the frameworks of that encompass moving from mindset to practices. So by adopting global reference frameworks and fitting them to the organization, but not inventing things and not diluting things, that builds our understanding as individuals. It allows us to exert more influence, and that then allows us to help assist the organization in developing higher quality and better velocity through the system. So the more understanding we have, the more our voice is heard. It just becomes a more convincing voice. Right. So Pallavi, this is your slide.
Yes, before we move on to this, any questions on the last slide from anyone? Okay, so we can take questions towards the end as well, but just that, it's a good point to ask. Cool. Moving on. Right, so there's many key aspects of transformation, but what we are saying is key is transformation demands understanding, but we'll get there and we'll see why that is absolutely essential. So firstly, everything transformational change starts with design. For most of you might be aware of the PROSI model as well. So for those of you that are aware, you can see as the first step of ADKAR is awareness, the next one is desire. So when do we think we're more motivated to do something or progress on a certain path? When somebody tells us what to do, or when we truly want to do something? Truly wanting to do something is desire. That personally having that intrinsic desire to do something. So that's where it starts. The next one is commitment. So as you can see, it talks about transformational change cannot happen without a clear and enduring purpose and commitment to it. Now, I want to take a moment here because this is quite important. And there's many crucial points here. So for those of you, and many of you might know, Edward Deming, who's the father of Lean and introduced all the Lean concepts in Toyota, he very strongly believed that for any transformational change to happen, there needs to be commitment from the highest levels of leadership. He went on to say that if you cannot do the task yourself, do not delegate it to, if you don't have that kind of commitment, please do not delegate it, right? So how does that commitment happen? The first thing is a clear and enduring purpose. Now there's two key words here. So in many organizations, when they want to go on transformations, one of the first things probably they do is define a vision for the transformation. Now, the first part of having a vision is having a clear purpose. Clarity is absolutely important. So, and what I mean by that is it means the same thing to everybody. Everybody is able to articulate it exactly what it means. It doesn't mean different things for different people. So that's what clarity is. The second part, and equally important part, is an enduring purpose. Enduring is long term. So if an organization has to change its vision every week or every month even, that's not thinking long enough. That's not transformation. You're thinking about some probably small continuous improvement to what you're already doing. So it's not transformational in nature. So absolutely starts with clear and enduring purpose. But having a clear and enduring purpose is not enough. People need to commit to it at all levels. How do you get that kind of commitment? By articulating clearly what it means for every one of them. So what does it mean for me? Yes, my organization is going through the transformation. What does it mean for me as a BA? What does it mean for me as a developer? Why? We understand the why and then we commit to it. That kind of commitment, frankly, doesn't come easy. So it comes either as a leap of faith, and sometimes it's dangerous because when you take a leap of faith, it can be in completely opposite direction and you could misjudge as well. But it can also come from sometimes, what in common language, if you're actually cornered and you have absolutely no other option, then you have to go about it. But that's quite risky too, because, most often that is too late to have that kind of commitment, right? So then how do you get that kind of commitment? Now, Ken Skwapner, he wrote books like Situational Leadership and Servant Leadership and 1 Minute Manager. He has a completely different perspective on commitment. He says there's 2 key ingredients and prerequisites to commitment. The first prerequisite that he talks about is motivation. So if there's absent motivation, we don't commit. Again, here we're talking about intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. A good example Pete and I talk about, and we laugh about it a lot, is about our fitness goals that we keep for ourselves and we keep failing miserably. So we always think, oh God, we're not doing enough to keep fit. So, we have to do something. So the desire is there. Definitely the desire is there. But more than likely, what we do lack is commitment. So we have the desire, but, are we committing to the time that is needed for the physical activity or the change in our eating habits? So it becomes a blocker there. Or what is our motivation to bring in that change, right? Just because somebody said so, everybody is doing it and an organization is doing, I don't know, some fancy loser challenge? No. But if there's something, a driver that I would personally have for myself that will motivate me and help me commit to that goal, probably more positively, right? Let's move on to the next one, Pete. So the second prerequisite to have that kind of commitment is confidence. So confidence, if we don't believe in ourselves, if we don't believe in our ability, then we can't be that motivated. Again, a good example probably is, let's say if I were to go bungee jumping, right? What is the confidence that I will have to do that, right? So I need to have confidence in my skills that I've trained. I need to have confidence in probably my trainer. I need to have confidence in the harness that I'm doing. So it flows on. So that, so motivation and confidence give you the ability to commit. But how do we actually get to all of this? This is where we get to the foundation of everything, is understanding. Now that seems like a very general thing, but what understanding what good looks like? Understanding gives us confidence because we know what our actions will do. We know the positive effect of or the benefits of what we're going to do. But it also gives us understanding of what happens if we don't make that change. Pete, another clip, yeah. Because it also gives us, okay, if we don't do this, so what are the pitfalls? If we don't change the direction of the organization or how we are doing things, this is what is going to happen. We're not going to be sustainable. We're not going to be relevant with the kind of changing environment. So that gets us to the foundation of it is because understanding. Any questions here? Cool. Let's move on to the next one, Pete.
Okay. Before we do that, I'd just like to say at this point that I read a quote the other day, and I can't remember if the particular quote came from someone at MIT or whether it was a chap who was a senior advisor to McKinsey. But the quote he made was that 90% of CEOs in the survey they had done were convinced that digital disruption was going to have a major impact on their business. 90% of CEOs believe that. But 15% of those CEOs had plans in place for transformation. So when you see something like that, you've got to really ask yourself, if you believe that your business is going to be impacted so heavily, how can you not be doing something about it? And I think what's missing is both of those, confidence and motivation. I think probably confidence is a big one. Remember that these very senior management people have reached those levels using the processes and thinking of the last revolution. And unless they have re-energized themselves to be lifelong thinkers in the new ways of thinking, then they are probably feeling quite nervous about things. So they lack motivation. And I think they also lack understanding, because they haven't really thought through what's going to happen. So at some level there'll be, oh my goodness, our business could be severely impacted. But when you've been, doing something the same way for generations, at an instinctual level, it's hard to imagine what could happen. But another quote that I read in the same period when I was doing some research the other day was that, according to Forbes, the Forbes do the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 1000 listings. According to Forbes, in the last 5 years, 3/4 of the members of the Fortune 1000 have changed places. They've dropped out. 3/4 of the people that are now in the Fortune 1000 were not there 5 years ago. And what they also said is that in the next 10 years, they're expecting the Fortune 500, 50% of the companies in the Fortune 500, they're not saying they'll drop out, they're saying that they will die. They're saying they are not going to survive this coming period. And when you put all of that together with the kind of comments that are coming out about how well prepared executive management are, then it starts to sort of present quite a scary picture. And as knowledge workers, we need to start thinking about, well, what can we do to sort of help out here? And this is a little bit of what we're going to talk about.
Pete, before we move on, there are some questions related to this in the chat, so if I can quickly answer some of those. From Ayang was asking, what have you found triggers this desire for change? Before desire, they may well be something else, and that's a very good question, Ayang. What we're saying here in terms of understanding is the foundation of everything. I would say understanding. So, and I'll just elaborate a little bit on that, and what I mean by that is that it's a little bit to do with the growth mindset as well. If you think what you're doing is the best and you do not have an open mind to see what else is out there, then you won't even get to the desire part. Like, how do you have the desire of improving what you have, right? So, for example, the fact that all of you are here in an Agile Auckland meetup, and I'm sure any of the sessions that you're going and being open-minded about, okay, there might be something that might be relevant or something that I would benefit from this or we have not thought about, shows growth mindset, right? We're not talking about, when you have that kind of mindset and you're open to understanding different things, it triggers that desire. You might see something here that might make it click in terms of it might be relevant in the organization. Hey, I should try that technique. So that's what we're talking about. There is a saying in my mother tongue. It says, and it just stays with me. Is one of my professors. He wrote on my when I was leaving the university. Sada vidyarthi melugumu. What that means is, may you be a lifelong student. So he didn't necessarily mean that I have to stay at the university lifelong, but what it meant was, that always do have the growth mindset and always do have a learning mindset and continue to be on that path. So I guess, understanding becomes the foundation for the desire. There was one question from Sid, probably Pete, you can take this. Can we say hidebound thinking exists in organizations that are not willing to accept change?
Yeah. I fully believe that. So I think of framework thinking as the way professionals think. It's a disciplined mindset. Professionals go out, they acquire knowledge. They want to fit that to their daily lives. And the hidebound thinking is, if anyone's read Nick Kirsten's From Project to Product book, he's a professor, I think. He's a PhD anyway. The quote that I always remember out of that is where he says, the problem is not that organizations aren't aware that they need to change. The problem is that they're applying the managerial frameworks and thinking from the previous revolution to try and do business at the turning point into the new revolution. And that's hidebound thinking in a nutshell. It's not being able to change. I'm sure that those organizations, everybody involved, has the best intentions and desire for things to turn out well for the organization, but they really don't understand how to go about doing it. And if I can sort of say this, probably get me in trouble, it seems to me that the higher you work your way up in an organization, the less willing you are to acquire new learning. And I think that that's probably a feature of the fact that what you've been doing has been successful. You know, if you're in the executive of an organization, you didn't get there by accident. You got there because you were really good at something. And why would you abandon that now? The reason why you would abandon it is because we're at the turning point for a revolution. It's not business as usual. But until you've got that understanding, then the breakthrough doesn't happen. You know, in Scaled, Agile and Safe, they call it the tipping point. Those of you that have been involved in Safe will know this. Organizations struggle. They reach a tipping point and bang, suddenly they get it. And then they break free of that hidebound thinking. But I guess what the commentators are saying is they're not expecting the majority of organizations to have that happen to them.
Cool. And there's a few other questions as well, but we might take them towards the end, Pete, if you want to.
Okay. I can't see the questions here because I'm sharing the screen. But
yeah, that's all good.
Let's click on. So now the next bit is, okay, so how do we make all that work, right? What we've just been discussing. So you'll all be familiar with Ahmed Sidki's diagram. Starts with a mindset described by a few values, defined by several principles and manifested through defined policy, standards, methods, techniques. So this is a variation on Ahmed Sidki's diagram for Agile, describing Agile. Right? But we can use this approach to describe any kind of a framework. So if we break those items out, mindset, value, principles, policy, standards, techniques, we can wrap something around these three, and they're telling us how to think. The mindset, the values, and the principles are telling us how to think. And these three, the policies, standards, techniques, and methods, they're telling us how to act. So how we think and how we act, those are the two parts to it. You wrap that up, and that's a framework. Frameworks can contain other frameworks. So, for example, the Agile framework can contain the Scrum framework. There are probably many other examples too. The Kanban framework, if you can call that a framework, right, fits within the Agile framework. People say, you know, extreme programming fits within the Agile framework, although it might actually run alongside it. So frameworks can contain other frameworks, and they can go across frameworks. So frameworks can take elements of multiple other frameworks to form their own framework. And when we're talking about role-specific frameworks for how to go about our daily work, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how does a BA in this world go about their work, or a PM, or a QA person, or anything to do with what we do. So let's look now at the elements of a framework. So starts with mindset. The framework, the growth mindset is a willingness to accept that we need to grow. Traditional ways of working are not appropriate. We need to have a genuine desire to actively, and keyword persistently, regularly, in a disciplined way, learn, understand, and adopt new approaches. But when I say adopt new approaches, I'm talking about adopting frameworks that are proven. You know, don't go and invent a new Agile. Don't do Agile with a little a, or be nimble instead of Agile. You know, I've seen all of those. You've probably come across them too, right? And because people are unwilling to actually learn the framework. So here's some attributes: a clean and enduring purpose, a focus on improving daily work, and a commitment to lifelong learning. If we look at values Values are the qualities and beliefs that govern our behaviour. We need to work these out so that we can establish our principles. Here's some example values. Scaled Agile, we value alignment because we know it's the basis for success. Lean, quality cannot be inspected into a product, it can only be built in. Agile, we value working software over comprehensive documentation. Principles, these represent a commitment to what we lay out in our values. So here's some principles. Scaled Agile, take an economic view, deliver early and often. This is straight out of their playbook, by the way. Lean, focus on improving the flow of work. That's part of the 3 ways of lean, improve flow. And Agile, you guys all know this one, working software is the only true measure of progress. From there, we can then move into policies. Policies expand on our principles and they define our intent. We set policies, we look to principles to set our policies. Here's some examples, just made up. All traffic, data traffic across firewalls will be encrypted. Architectural work will not proceed in advance of business analysis. Now, for most organizations, it's the other way around. For most organizations, we see enterprise architects walking into the business before they actually understand the business needs. The business needs haven't been laid out. They do the best of their ability, but if you haven't got the business needs, you don't understand the business value. If you don't know the business value, you can't prioritize anything. Another policy example, quantified and verified business value, well, there it is, must be established before prioritizing work. Now that means a BA needs to at least be alongside the enterprise architect when they're having the initial discussions with the business, or the enterprise architect needs to understand business analysis and have that baked into their framework. The standards are the mandatory rules in support of the policy. This is how we must proceed. So here's some standards. Epics, this is a scaled agile one. Epics must have an associated hypothesis and lean business case in agreed formats. Another made up one, define requirements and specification in agreed formats as a prerequisite for starting work. And then techniques and methods. I can't actually see these, they're off to the side, but these are actually what we now use. This is the bits of the framework that we assemble and use, the things that Pallavi was describing before. Okay, so for our risk management framework, we're going to have risk quantification followed by risk impact, risk response, risk qualification first rather, and then quantification at the end if the value is more than $10,000 or something. And so here's some. So Scrum is a framework, but it's also a method. It lays out exactly how we do things. Way to sort a job first, that comes out of Scaled Agile. That's a way of prioritizing. ORID is a retrospective technique for managing structured conversations and retrospectives. So just in case anyone's concerned about the slides, you'll all be getting access to a copy of these slides after, afterwards. Beth's going to send it out to everybody. So those are the elements of a framework. I can't see chat. Is there any questions on that right there?
Luke is going to, Luke is going to consolidate all the questions and send towards the end so we can keep going, Pete.
Okay, just keep going. All right.
Yep, no worries.
Okay, thank you. So here's some example values. You know the Agile ones. Those ones are from a Project Management Institute: honesty, fairness, respect, and responsibility. Scaled Agile has 4 values: alignment, transparency, program execution, and I can't see the other one, and now I'm caught out because I don't know what it is. There you go. There's our 12 Agile principles, straight off the Agile website. We all know what they are. And here's some Scaled Agile principles. These are the 9 Scaled Agile principles. In fact, there's another one now because I just released Scaled Agile 5.0. I don't know if I've actually updated these slides to put that in there. The only reason I'm using Scaled Agile is not because I'm pushing Scaled Agile. I like Scaled Agile. I think it's a pretty good comprehensive framework. But the reason I'm using it is because it's got lots of material I can just crib and stick up here and say, well, that's what a principle is. That's what a principle looks like. Rather than just talking about principles, giving you examples of what these things look like. All right. So now let's look at frameworks in practice. So there are our elements, once again. And frameworks, like work itself, must flow from left to right. And we're starting to get to the nitty-gritty now. This is the absolute nitty-gritty of it. Okay, so work, as we know, must flow from left to right. It can't go backwards. If it goes backwards, we've got something broken in the system. Frameworks, like work itself, must flow from left to right as well. So here's somebody and he goes, hey, we've uncovered a gap. And this lady says, no problem, look left to fill it. It's her right, but she's pointing to the left. So what do? We drop down into standards. We don't try and invent a technique right there or a method. That's solution thinking. We go, what framework can we apply? Okay, what standard applies here? We find the standard, we use the standard to address how we're going to, what technique or method or whatever it is we're going to grab. Now, if there's no standard, we have to go back to policies. We have to say, okay, what policy applies here? We use that policy to set a standard, and then that standard can then move forward to techniques and methods. What if there's no policy? This is very typically the case. We then look at principles. Now, in organisations where I've gone into, it's a question I like to ask people a lot, and I'm probably quite annoying doing it. But when they come up with a solution for something, I go, what's the principle you've based that on? And it's an uncomfortable question when I ask that of people, because usually they don't have it. So I have to be nice about it and say, look, don't worry about it. You know, most of the time we don't have these things, but do you think it's worthwhile thinking about what principle we should base it on? Now, having a principle is important. I'll give you an example. I'll use an example from QA, testing. So the old hidebound way of thinking about testing was, and I run into this all the time still, with very intelligent people who say, we have to keep our testers separate from our developers. They have to catch the mistakes the developers are making, all right? They also say things like, if you code it, you shouldn't be the person that tests it. Now, these are principles, right? They are opposed to the DevOps way of thinking. The DevOps way of thinking is 180 degrees opposed to that. The DevOps way of thinking is not about separation, it's about collaboration. In DevOps, the principle is testers and developers will work together to define the test cases before any work is done. The job of the tester is not to catch the developer out. The job of the tester is to make sure the developer can't go wrong. Do you see how these principles are diametrically opposed to each other? And if we haven't worked them out, how on earth can we figure out policy standards or techniques and methods? We're just going to sort of be banging around in a confused sort of way, doing things in many different ways, many different people doing the best they can, but they're not taking a discipline structured approach to it. So if we don't have principles, obviously we go to values. If we don't have values, we go to mindset. If we don't have mindset, we go and find another job. Because, you know, we're in a period of traumatic industry turmoil. It's akin to the 1930s in America. That was a turning point of the Industrial Revolution that was kicked off in 1908 with the first production assembly lines went in, reached its turning point in the 30s. Our revolution kicked off in 1971 when the microprocessor was invented. And we've now reached our turning point. And this is where the turmoil happens. So honestly, if we're in an organization where the mindset just isn't there and we can't influence it, then it might be time to move on. Okay, so that's the process. We want that framework to be established going from left to right, not right to left. Now, when Ahmed Sidki did this, he talked about being agile and doing agile. So out to the right is doing agile. If we're just adopting practices and methods without any understanding, then we're doing agile. This is what he was worried about. But unfortunately, the term being agile got picked up and misused the same way, because people thought, well, as long as I've just got the mindset, then I don't need anything else. I'll be agile with a little a, or I'll be nimble instead of agile, you know, and they started inventing stuff, right? So it's not about being agile and doing agile. It's about becoming agile. You start with the mindset, and then you become agile by moving from left to right through all of this. You become an adept master in your own framework by doing the same within the framework of your discipline, whatever that's based on. So for most effective results, every discipline must implement this full stack. Mindset and values can be shared across disciplines within a wider framework. Some principles can be shared across disciplines, but some principles, as I gave you the example with the QA, are specific to a role. Policy standards and methods are generally role specific, although some will go across roles. Policies about deployment or something like that. Here's the biggest mistake, and this I'm sure will be familiar to you all. I see it everywhere I go. This person says, well, I've uncovered a gap, and the answer is, let's fix it. And it's fixed in situ. Such solution thinking is applied. What do we need to do to fix this gap? And they haven't paid any thought to the stuff out to the left. Now, there's no sound basis for this. It's not likely to be a good outcome. By chance, it might be. It's not likely to be supported because only the people that were around at the time have bought into it. If you're taking a framework-driven approach, then everybody along those steps along the way has bought into the mindset, values, principles, policies, and standards. And if you need one, then you go and get that validation of a new standard or a new policy or a new principle. You work it out with all the stakeholders. But the chances are that not every stakeholder was involved in this solution. It won't be defensible because it will. The way this is commonly defended is when I ask this question, and it's aligned to the question asked by principal, and I say, okay, so how did you go about making this decision? The general answer is, look, we had some very senior people in the room. We had this person senior from there and this person senior from there, and we discussed it thoroughly, and this was the answer we came up with, and it suits us. Now, the translation of that is we sat around a room talking until we came up with something. That's what that actual translation is. Okay, this solution will probably be revisited. This is why we see decisions that don't last. They get changed, and then they get changed again, and they get set back the other way when some other people come along. And then, you know, this is, I'm sure this is familiar to you because I see it everywhere I go. And like I say, unless you're in a very lucky company, you'll be seeing it where you are as well. The key here is not to fall into this mistake, to always look to the frameworks. Say, okay, what framework element can we base this on? What do we need to be talking about? The nature of the framework, as Pallavi pointed out back in that slide. Okay, otherwise we end up with these broken and ineffective frameworks. Right, so how do we, and this is where the rubber meets the road, how do we construct a role-specific, or if you are incorporating yourself as a knowledge worker, your personal framework? This is how I do business analysis. This is how I do project management or change management or whatever. And if you're basing it on core frameworks for the new economy, and these are the current core frameworks for the new economy, they could change, but right now these are them. If you base whatever you build on that, then you will be able to assemble something that will be substantial and will stand the test of time. And you can help build these for your organization, but you don't have to wait if you're not in that you know, level of influence within your organization. You can start building them with your peers. Rosemary over at the ASB, I know that you saw this happening at the ASB, where the different discipline groups got together and started working out their own frameworks within Agile. And you don't need to wait. The BAs got together and said, let's work out what we need to be doing. The PMs got together, the different roles all got together, and they started working this out. You base it on those core frameworks and you're going to come up with something that's pretty good. Might not be perfect, but that's why we have continuous improvement. Right. So that's the talking head bit. It went for a bit longer than I expected. Are there any questions we want to answer at this point, Pallavi, or do we move now into rapid listing?
There are really good questions coming through. Like, I'm quite excited to get to that part. So I think we let's finish this and take questions. I think, Peter.
Stop here and take questions.
No,
All
no,
right.
no. Let's
do the rapid listing.
Yeah.
All right. So this is our activity now. It's been amended for the virtual state that we're in. So rapid listing, the first part of it is silent writing. So individually by yourselves, write down, wherever you like, some principles that you might apply to your area, domain, discipline, whatever is actually top of mind with you. It doesn't have to even be your work-related stuff. It can be anything you like. What are some principles that you would like to apply? We're going to spend 3 minutes doing that. This next step is then we would turn to the person next to you and discuss and refine those. Now, we're not going to do that because of the spiky little thing that we've got. So we can't do that. We tried to use the virtual technology, but the problem is if we put you into a meeting room, a breakout room with just 2 of you, when we went into these breakout rooms with 4 people, we couldn't be sure that you were going to end up together, and then that would just be crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight from step 1 to step 3. Rapid listing, 3 minutes, and then 5 minutes, we'll put you into breakout room groups. It will just happen for you. You'll be taken out of this main meeting and put into these breakout rooms. And then in those breakout rooms, please appoint a spokesperson. And in the last minute, identify the top 1 to 3 that you'd like to talk to. And then we will bring it back to the group and do round robin for the time that we have available left in this virtual meeting. All right, we good with that? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now then, so that we can move into the breakout rooms and so that I can see the other chat as well. Okay, Beth, it's over to you now. Oh, no, it's not over to you yet.
Yeah, we're going to do the 3 minutes first and then breakout rooms, correct?
3 minutes first and then the breakout rooms. That is right.
Great, thanks.
Just lost my Zoom. Okay.
We can see you, Pete. Can see and hear you.
Okay, I've only got a really tiny screen. I don't know. Here we go. It's back now. All right. So I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes. And if you can just write down 3 principles that you think would be useful to apply. They could be to a role at work or anything you like. Okay, so let's start now, 3 minutes from now. Okay, 1 minute left. Okay, that's it. Time up. So what's now going to happen is that Beth's going to organise everybody into rooms, into breakout rooms. So if you haven't used the Zoom breakout room function before, I've never used it before. This is the first time for me. What happens is Beth will organise it so you end up in a little Zoom meeting of 4 or 5 people.
Yep.
And that'll go for 5 minutes. And then at the end of that, you'll be brought back into this meeting. So at the 1 minute mark, when you've got 1 minute left, there'll be a message go out saying you've got 1 minute left in your meeting, your breakout. At that point, can you identify a spokesperson for your group and what items you want them to be reporting back on? And then we'll just do a round robin discussion. Okay? Okay, Beth, so
All right,
Yep.
I'm gonna open all rooms, and you guys should just fly away. So good luck.
Hi, is this our group, is it, or?
Yeah, it's slightly different from what I experienced before. It seems just the rest of the people fade away.
Yeah,
We
usually
have
it takes you away.
still one people disappeared, one person. So we have how many?
There's 7.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7 of
8.
us. How do you guys feel? It's a bit tough, right?
Yeah.
I tried to, in order to work out this, I tried to work on the value first. But the boundary between principle and the policies is quite vague. So our goal is just try to talk about 1 to 3 principles, right, at the end of our discussion.
Yep.
One thing that's I'm not sure, in case team members face conflict, I would say one principle is always one-to-one discussion first. So that will be principle or policy. Or now then.
If it is policies, wouldn't that be documented somewhere? Whereas I'm completely new to Agile, but that's my thought. Whereas principles is just what you do when you're in the particular situations. So I think having one-on-one meetings, unless it's like documented that that you must have one-on-one meetings, I think it falls into principles. I'm not sure. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I just feel when I read the slides, quite clear, but really want to consider identify principles hard.
I think it feels more like a policy because one-to-one communication would be maybe a principle, and then having one-to-one meetings would be like the expected behavior of how you would act on that policy to communicate with the intended person, maybe.
Yeah, sounds more like policy rather than principle.
Would collaboration be a value, and then drilling that down a bit further, consider everyone's inputs as sort of a principle?
Yeah.
A principle of collaboration, and then how that could be done would be your one-on-one communication. I don't know, just putting something out there. It's hard. Yeah.
It's
I wrote collaboration also, but I like the idea of having make that a value. So that's
collaboration is value. Yeah.
Yeah.
how about something like this? Just kind of looking at some of the principles and the manifesto. I wrote this as one which was different, and it's not in anybody else's thing. Don't be afraid of competition. Embrace it.
Mm.
I wanted to come up with something that wasn't already there. And no one talks about the competition. And now we're in this competitive world. I think we're coming back.
We've been pulled back.
Oh my God.
The wonders of technology. Welcome back, everybody.
I thought we had 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's Beth's timing. It's American 5 minutes, so it's really 4. So,
so an imperial 5 minutes instead of a metric one.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Anthony.
Shoot first, ask questions later.
I know whose voice that was. All right,
It's 5 minutes on Mars.
I'm going to turn it back to Pete and Pallavi.
Okay. So Pallavi, do you want to take the round robin part?
Sure, Pete. I'm just wondering. So were there some people in room number 1? Because I think the room numbers weren't in sequential order as well. So I will have to check what room numbers you were in. So do we have people from room number 1?
How do we tell which room we're?
Oh, it should have given you a name, wasn't it?
No, it didn't. It went right into the people.
Okay.
Okay.
Why doesn't just who wants to go first then?
Who wants to share? Yeah. Cool.
Jim Buchan will start.
Okay.
just to get it going and kick off. We had an amazing group of values that I think I'm going to adopt for the rest of my life. The ones that we picked out, so we picked out a top one for each person. So one of them was be ready to articulate your desired outcome for anything that you're doing in any kind of work. Another one was around empowering people and a willingness and capability to empower others. And the other one was about being curious and encouraging curiosity in other people. There we go.
Really good ones. Thanks for sharing, Jim.
Okay.
I'm just making a note in case themes come through while others are sharing as well. Cool. Who wants to go next? Go on, Rosemary. You're on mute. Sorry.
In our team, you cannot finish yet because Sebastian is with 2 girls and he can finish. Then Sebastian, please, can you go?
Yeah, okay, don't worry. Thank you, Adriana. Okay, yeah, we were in a team where most of us, or all of the members, work in IT previously. So our thinking was mostly similar. No matter whether we are working in IT project or any other kind of project, well, the most important the most important thing we took as this the principle is the empathy the teams should have should work with. Collaboration teams, or all the members of any working team should be working as a unique piece, finding solutions, thinking the way the business is needing a solution. Most of the time happen in IT team that the way they think is not the same as the business need their solution. So that's one of the most important things. The all together IT and business need to work as a unique team, right? One team. So that's what we thought with this little team. Okay.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Sebastian. I think you've touched on very interesting points about empathy and collaboration. If you think about it, a lot of these points, even from the previous one, are applicable at an individual level. Like, how do we, what are our principles at an individual level that we are applying in our lives, not just in a professional environment, I guess, empathy,
That's right, yeah.
collaboration, working together. Very nice ones. Who wants to go next?
We can go.
Yeah.
So we had a mixed group, and I'm not from the Agile coaching side, but we came up with, funny enough, with principles that are common for everyone. And obviously, some of the principles have been already announced. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about encouraging people to learn and being curious as well. We were also talking about transparency and accountability, and as well as working together and collaboration, which is very important. So basically kind of repeating other other speakers, but yeah, looks like there is a lot of common values in those.
Oh, absolutely, and that's where these common themes emerge, as well as we're doing this session. I can't stop thinking in terms of how we are actually displaying some of those values, right? Like these Zoom sessions, in terms of how we are adapting to change rather than following a plan, but also in terms of, I keep thinking back in terms of feedback loops, where we're trying to, obviously these sessions are working well, but when we try to get feedback in terms of, do we want to go virtual sessions or just assuming to continue this, instead of that, actually taking feedback from people and actually learning interesting things from there. So yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, who next?
I can go next. So we had trust and collaboration as well. But the other two things that we talked about and chose were simplicity and customer satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the two Agile principles.
Very good. Thanks for that, Seema. We did talk about, in some of the frameworks that we were talking about customer research and validation, but how we actually keep that in mind. It's really relevant for our existence, I guess. Thanks for that. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Yes, please.
Hi, we had a group of 4, Ray, Celine, myself, Sid and Stephanie, and we came from a few different backgrounds. So we chose one principle each that was important to us. So one of them was be ready to articulate, no, that was someone else's, sorry, a common view of what is important across disciplines, like so the team having a common view of the important outcomes. Simplicity, which someone else came up with, which keeping things simple and not overcomplicating everything. And the just working together, the collaboration, the business people and the developers working together daily.
Yeah, very emergent themes as well. Thanks, Elena. And the common view is, as we're talking about, is the vision as well. So unless, we have a common vision or a common view and we actually commit to it, then it's going to be hard. So really good one. Thank you. I think there were more rooms. Anybody else wants to share?
I'll jump in for our room. So we were room 7, which was Deb, Richie and Leslie. And I'll admit that we weren't organised enough to even appoint a spokesperson. So hopefully they're okay with me speaking. And we didn't really manage to get to agreed alignment, but I think there were some themes that sort of came up repeatedly from people. So culture, being the importance of culture and that being a significant thing. Experimentation, inspecting and adapting, and continuous improvement, incremental launching being important. Buy-in and alignment. So I'm just going through my list here. Team building, which comes back to culture. Focusing on problems and not on solutions. And then lastly, a few sort of personal things, which was every person is whole, everyone should be aligned, judge yourself by your intentions, but others by actions, and starting where people are and not where they want to be and not where you want them to be.
Oh, really, really, really nice ones. Some really deep ones out there as well. And there was, I saw, so during the break, we saw some questions in Teams chat, and there was some really good points in terms of experimentation and adaptation. So, you know, once we go through this, really keen to talk about that as well. Thanks for sharing, Anthony. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, we were room 11 with Al and Joe. We also, same as you, Anthony, we ran out of time to nominate, choose 3. So we had keep it simple, welcome change, anything that can be automated should be automated, no more long running branches, came from Al with more like development, reflect and adjust continuously, and willingness to develop ways of working.
Really good ones. I think obviously role specific ones as well, but yeah, really good stuff. Thanks, Silly. Okay, anyone else?
I can go next.
Yes, please, Ramandi.
We could not, I don't remember which room I was in. I only remember one of my teammates, Edwin, and we couldn't finish discussing it all. So I nominated without even, you know, apologies for self-nominating. The thing that we've written was business people, dev, QAs, the whole team should work together. And the preferred mode of communication should be face-to-face, although I mentioned that I prefer to get things in written before committing to anything. And the trust between the team members and the customers should be there. That's the most important bit, that the trust that it will be get done, it should be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, there's some very interesting points you mentioned there in terms of, you know, having written stuff down. It directly talks to the trust in the team, I guess. High level of trust, you might not need that versus low levels of trust. I mean, there's must be something happening that would trigger for the team members to behave in a certain way to get that kind of sign-off.
Sometimes it just comes down to SLAs between the client and the delivery team. So that's when you need things getting in written. When I said get things written, get things in written,
yeah,
you get things in written from the client.
That's right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a vendor kind of environment.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, who else? Anyone else wants to share? Or have we covered all the rooms? Is there anybody that we've not heard feedback from one of your roommates?
I'll share one. It's, our group, we had a lot of people and we were trying to figure out what we want. But at the end, there was 2 things we talked about. One was collaboration, but kind of some people thought it was a more of a value than a principle. And then at the end, the last minute, because we ran out of time, I threw this out and then went away. Don't be afraid of competition. Embrace it.
Okay.
As a principle.
That's really good one. Because you can be as best as your competition, isn't it? Sometimes, you know, it's good to have high standards and have somebody push you to your limits, I guess.
Well, that if you're not paying attention to your competition, they're going to surprise you.
Yes.
Right? You think you got all the answers and the other group just drops something. You're like, uh-oh, we have a day to fix this.
Oh, yeah, yeah. There's some really good examples. I don't want to take too much time, but I guess about more than 5 years back, you know, when they used to do strategy documents for big banks, you'd see the other 4 banks as the major competitors, and the landscape changed, and things like, you know, TradeMe, when it started peer-to-peer lending, or all the peer-to-peer lending marketers out there, all these names started coming up as a part of, you know, threats, which you don't even think about in a context of a bank. So yeah, always pay attention to competition, I guess.
I just want to add one, if you don't mind. The just recently, when the traders companies stopped charging a fee, instantly, everybody's like, "Oh God, we're not charging fees anymore. What are we gonna do? We gotta change how we do business and operate." Boom. You know, within a week you had to flip it.
Yeah, yeah, really. Yeah, I think over the last 1 month or 6 weeks, we've seen many of these instances, right? So, yeah, really relevant in today's environment.
Ray, you want to say something?
Yeah.
Ray, yeah.
The word co-petition comes up. You know, sometimes you need to realize that your competitor and both of you can get a common change or a common environment, a framework maybe, which is good for both of you or all of you. So it's not always us versus them. Sometimes it's, you know, when you think of a whole lot of standards coming into being so that everyone's stuff works together or whatever. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. There are many businesses right now. Every business is trying to reinvent themselves. So it's a messy whirlpool. We're all fighting for new spaces. But so maybe, yeah, co-petition, just remember, I think.
Yeah, coexistence and build on each other's strengths. Yeah, really good point.
Pallavi, can I speak a little bit to that as well?
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you, Ray. The way that I think about it is that we should be competing on product, not on system. So if we go back to 1908, when Henry Ford put in a production line, Chrysler was faced with an existential threat. They had their cars, they were being built by hand. That's not going to run anymore. The low-cost car markets could not support a by-hand model. Yeah. So they had to switch. They didn't sit down and invent their own assembly line. They just copied the system. They may even have worked with Ford cooperatively to work out what is the best assembly line. What they competed on was product. They competed on what comes off the assembly line. And that's the same place we are today, because when we talk about work moving through the whole process from left to right, and Greg, I think it was you that made the comment about this very disruptive thing happened to you, and you had a short period of time to address it. That means you need to have really short cycle times. You need to have a way that you can move work through the system from left to right really quickly while maintaining quality. Because if you don't maintain the quality, you're just going to create more problems for yourselves, right? So that part of it, we can develop as a society. We can develop that, you know. Our disciplines work together across competition. You know, the whole DevOps concept works across competition. So does Agile work across competition. So does Lean. They all work cooperatively with competition. But when it comes to my product, I'm not going to talk to you about my products. I'm going to beat you with my products, right?
Exactly. But that's a point of understanding what is product and what what your unique offering or your real skill is.
Yeah.
Pete, I'm just conscious of time. So I think we've covered the feedback, but there's lots of questions to answer. So I'm not sure if we are able to answer all the questions. It depends on how much time others have. Well,
we've only got 1 minute left, so I think probably we should hand it back to Beth at this point.
Yeah.
So we do look. It's up to you guys. This is virtual, right? We're not getting kicked out of a venue. So if you want to stay online, we can certainly take a couple questions. If not, we are going to share the slide deck, and if Pete and Pallavi are willing, we could share their contact information as well, or we can start the chat on Slack. So it's up to you guys, and please unmute and let me know what you're thinking. What would you like to do? We can drop off, or we can keep going.
I could stay for about another 5 minutes, Beth.
I have a list of 8 or 9 questions. If we don't answer them all now, I've got them collated so I can send them to you guys and you can follow it up later.
Okay, so let's just say in the interest of time, especially thank you, Pete, for letting us know 5 minutes. With 9 questions, I don't think we can do it. So let's just be fair. We'll send you guys the questions. We'll get some answers. You guys can even video your answers and we'll post it on YouTube with this video. But we do appreciate it. And yeah, thank you, Pete and Pallavi. That was amazing. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback and a lot of good questions. So awesome. And just for everybody, our next meetup will be June 17th. We are not going to have a May 20th meetup. Unfortunately, our presenter had to back out of that. So so June 17th, it'll be Jakub Julkovic with Agile Coaching Lab talking about bias and influence. So stay tuned for that. And as always, thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for the invitation, Beth. We appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Beth. So for some people have just mentioned that they'd like to ask the questions directly. So I think probably the easiest thing we confirm, you can share our LinkedIn profiles, I guess. So feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, guys. And if you have specific questions, happy to answer anything there. So yeah, really keen to continue the conversation with the community. Thanks everyone for giving us your time this evening. Have a lovely rest of the evening.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.